As a journalist who has covered the finance sector over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to interview and engage with some of the best minds in the space. Leaving big bank earnings reports to the boring traditional media firms, I'll focus on the tech-savvy apps, digital investing platforms, challenger banks, and payment giants to drive relevant content that looks forward to disruption instead of fearing it. I'm Nicole Casperson, Fintech journalist, and this is What the Fintech. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of What the Fintech, a podcast for fintech professionals who want to shape the future of our industry with innovation and inclusion. I'm your host, Nicole Casperson, and today I'm sitting down with Anthony Zhang, founder and CEO of Vinovest, a fintech for fine wine investing. With Vinovest, retail investors can build, track, and analyze their own fully insured wine portfolios, an asset class that's traditionally only been available to less than 1% of all investors, and one that's appreciated nearly 130% over the last decade. As for Anthony, he's founded 3 companies by the age of 25, sold one to a Walmart subsidiary, and has been funded by Mark Cuban and Peter Thiel. His story is truly an inspiration. Anthony, I'm so happy to have you here with us. Welcome to What the Fintech.
Hey, Nicole. I'm super glad to be on, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, how are you doing today? Where are you located? You have an actual wine cellar and boxes behind you, which is just awesome. I love that imagery.
Yeah, I am in my mother-in-law's home office / wine cellar, so in Orange County, and it is a beautiful day, so I can't complain.
Oh, okay. I'm originally from Mission Viejo, so I'm a little jealous.
Super close, yeah.
It is it is mad beautiful there. So yeah, amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. I do love to open up the conversation by learning more about you and your background and how that really influences your leadership. So both of your parents are Chinese immigrants that traveled for work. So you did spend most of your childhood in Hong Kong and Beijing. How have those experiences really shaped your values today?
Yeah, so I was born here in the States, but as you mentioned, I lived most of my childhood life abroad and in cities like Hong Kong and Beijing and Vancouver even as well. I think just being the new kid a lot was definitely an eye-opening experience, but it also helped me appreciate new environments, new cultures, and new people. I moved around. I think I moved like over 10 or 12 houses before I was 18 and a bunch of different schools as well. So I really had to adapt, but it also helped me appreciate all of these different experiences. Being in a big city, being a part of a lot of different cultures, and I went to international schools growing up, so a lot of other kids in similar situations as me as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really do notice that common thread between a lot of my guests is that they've lived in a lot of different places and experienced a lot of cultures, and that just helps you just understand other people differently, right? And helps you have a better grasp that everyone's different, and that's, okay. And that actually is what makes you as a fintech leader and a company even better. So yeah, I also thought I was pissed that I moved one time in my childhood from California to Texas, which when you're a Cali kid is not what you want I was 13 is not what you want your parents
You're
to tell you.
This is the end of my life. No,
I sobbing, I was miserable, but ended up fine. But to move, you said 18 or 12 times or something crazy,
yeah,
double digit
I think I moved
times?
12 times before I was 18.
Crazy.
So a bunch of different homes, some were really far moves, right? Like from Hong Kong to Beijing or from Beijing to Vancouver. Some were just moves, maybe a couple miles down the street to another home. Beijing still has my heart. It's where I've spent most of my life, and just culturally have just appreciated how much that city has changed in a very, very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I haven't been yet, but it's on the list. You also went to USC and had a ton of interesting experiences, like pitching billionaires by 18 years old. So when you go to school for entrepreneurship, is there just already an expectation that you do more networking, if you will, i.e. skipping class outside of the classroom?
Oh yeah, I think the main reason why I chose to go to a school like USC was that they had that entrepreneurship major. Most schools are, you could do maybe economics or business administration, something a little more general, and then they have the MBA program. USC was super focused, so everybody there was really encouraging of new ideas, right? You're not just like expected to do your homework and get good grades. You're really out there to be able to build the right connections and knowledge and network to be able to build your first business.
Yeah, and you skipped class to go pitch Mark Cuban,
Yep.
raised 100K, and got everyone in your class an A. Who do you think was more jealous when you accomplished that? Your fellow students or your professor?
I'll give a shout out to my professor because I remember he told me before I was about to skip the class that he was going to dock me a letter grade if I missed his class. And I took that risk, and fortunately, it paid off. But even if I didn't get the funding, it would have been worth it. Just the experience to pitch a billionaire, to pitch a shark, that is something that I'll never take for granted.
What was the pitch?
It was really my first business. It was a college food delivery app called Envoy Now. So much like your Uber Eats and Postmates, but the thing that made us special was that we really leaned into the whole college environment. So if you didn't have the school email, you couldn't deliver. You couldn't even log into the app. Everything was location gated. It was linked to your student ID so that students would be able to trust whoever they were delivering to and whoever they were getting the delivery with. So that's, I think, what really created the virality on each college campus that led to our growth.
Wow. And so what you're telling me is that by like at 18 or so, you already had kind of the understanding that exclusivity with companies and really catering to like that specific niche and building that community, if you will, are like crazy key factors. And then, fast forward to today and you've also implemented that with Vinovest. So that's like such a cool hunch to have at so young.
Yeah, I'll say that I definitely didn't know that was my hunch then. It was really just more so out of necessity because USC it's a little bit of like an oasis in LA, right? It's right
Mhm.
smack dab in the middle of downtown. There are spots that are not very safe at night, so we had to
Right.
actually location gate it, and especially when you're getting deliveries late at night, you want to be able to let the right people into campus. So it was more and more of necessity, but we realized it was a business model that created trust and friendliness and community, and we just rolled with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's super smart, and to do the same, today, and kind of see the trends like align with that, even though you maybe didn't realize you had like a really good crystal ball, but it ends up that you did. Must be kind of like an awesome feeling, and knowing that you have that, and as you get older, right, you're just gonna like probably keep building on that instinct. So kudos for just like having that within you because not a lot of people have that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think even though the businesses that I built are so different than what I'm doing today, I think the best thing is you learn as you go, right? And as you mentioned, you can find those parallels, even if they're not so obvious at face value, that can help you as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, amazing. And kind of speaking of your career and all the success you had, you did have a spinal cord injury that did change your life. You fought for your life and turned around and showed that true perseverance. I'm definitely a believer and try to show that with my content that our differences are our superpower. From your perspective and personal experiences, would you agree and why?
Yeah, my injury 5 years ago changed my life. It's a permanent injury. I'm still in a wheelchair today, and there's a lot of things that I'll never be able to do again. But there's also a lot of perspective that I gained along the way, and that hey, like I'm lucky to still be alive. I'm lucky to be able to breathe on my own. Lucky to not be in to need to be in a hospital setting, and I'm lucky to still have everything up here in my brain, so I can be able to do things that I love to do. So I totally agree that people who are different, whether it be at face value or something a little bit less obvious, bring something to the table that is special, and whether it be from a diversity standpoint or an inclusion standpoint or just a company building standpoint from both a customer base as well as an employee base, I totally subscribe to that it makes and builds the best outcomes over time as well.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of looking at the other side of, I guess what makes you diverse. And you recently wrote an article for entrepreneur.com addressing that Asian millennials as a group are redefining investors' relationship with luxury assets. I found it super interesting. Why was it important to write this article and address the Asian millennial influence over investing?
Yeah. For those of you who maybe can't see me, I am an Asian millennial, so that's
Same.
number one. So we've got that, and I think just because of my experiences abroad, still a lot of my really close friends are maybe they went to school here in the States and now they're back in Asia, and I think they're really seeing some key trends that I think will start to um, kind of infiltrate the global economy, right? Everyone talks about the baby boomers and how they're have so much power over the economy. I think the next big one is millennials in Asia, and ones that are wealthy, right? Because not only is that the fastest growing wealth segment in the world, but it's one that I think has kind of been overlooked because everyone's just talking about Gen Z and fintech, whereas the ones that are actually having the spending power today and for the next decade or so, 2 decades, 3 decades, are going to be millennials, and most of them are going to be coming out of Asia, especially the newly wealthy ones.
Yeah, it does seem interesting that like millennials had a lot of attention for a while,
Most of it
and then
bad, right? Most of
yeah,
it pretty bad attention.
I know. It's why I've been identifying lately as a zillennial because I'm like right on the cusp of kind of.
I like that.
I'm a few
Zillennial.
years away from
Okay,
the cusp, but I'm like appreciative of Gen Z and everything that they've like, done to really like bring awareness and like they don't take the BS. But anyway, giving some credit back to us millennials. Technically, that's what I am. Yeah, like bad press got a little overlooked with I think within the last like year, the last 18 months really because of the pandemic and especially in
hmm
fintech, right? I feel like the Gen Zers got the spotlight now because of GameStop and all of the things that have happened,
totally.
and TikTok and all the craziness. But yeah, I mean, but especially the elder millennials, like elder millennials, i.e., people in like their 30s or late 30s, are
Yeah, our elders. I love that.
there are elders. My partner's gonna kill me because he's an elder millennial. But anyway, it those are the folks with the true wealth. So and actually there's a lot of, I think there's like a misconception that they aren't as interested in like apps or building their wealth, or like, or that they're only interested in apps and they don't want to like leverage real wealth management or like financial advice from a human. But
hmm
those are like some of the misconceptions I hear.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's actually our biggest segment at Vinovest is these older millennials, kind of younger Gen Xers that they've got half a decade of working experience under their belt, right? They've got the money now, and they want to be able to start building their future and their wealth, and a lot of them are choosing to diversify in a way that is allocating a far larger percentage of their wealth into alternatives than say older Gen Xers or baby boomers, which they mostly have traditional portfolios, your 60/40.
And as we know, the 60/40 is RIP.
Yep.
No one wants that anymore. Well, I mean, someone does, I'm sure. But anyway, millennials, we don't apparently, because they're boring. I have heard of plenty of stories, even from other entrepreneurs in the fintech space who say like they, especially actually, mostly I hear this from immigrant founders who come to America and maybe they have their money and they try to work with an advisor, and they just want to throw everything into a 60/40 portfolio, and it's like
hmm
not the best returns and things aren't great and it's boring. Not only are they not having fun, but they're not diversifying their portfolio, so it just isn't working, which actually kind of ties perfectly into my next question, of jumping a little bit more into Vinovest and what you've built here. Obviously, alternative investing is hot. The aggregate value of alts is projected to increase over 300% to $17.2 trillion by 2025.
Wow.
Why do you think alts are having such a moment today? You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but getting a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah, I think it's really that part about people want to take control, right, of their finances. They're tired of waiting around, and they also realize that there are so many more options that are accessible to the everyday investor, because the reason why most people have a 60 portfolio, 60/40 is that that's all they can access, right? Everyone has equal and open access to the public markets. That really hasn't been the case for alternatives up until very recently, right? You first have the boom of all these real estate investing platforms. Before, you had to be a multimillionaire and have all sorts of licenses and knowledge to invest in real estate. Now apps can, at a click of a button, you don't even see to see the home, and you're like, boom, I'm a partial homeowner. same thing I think is continuing with a lot of other alts that were previously very inaccessible. And Vinovest with the wine and spirits industry, we're doing just that, right? We're taking away the barriers to entry, like knowing anything about wine or whiskey, or getting access to the rarest stuff in the world, or even storage, right? Most people don't have the time or space or the want to dedicate an entire bedroom to storing your stuff. So for these hard
Just
assets, we are
exactly.
we're allowing anybody with an iPhone or a smartphone to be able to invest in wine, and we take care of everything else. And for them, the experience is the same thing as if they were investing through, Robinhood or one of their more traditional stock investing apps.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's just like fun. Like I totally understand being intrigued by fine wine as an asset class, right? It's fun, it's luxury, it's something that was very exclusive to the ultra
Mhm.
wealthy. So, with your entrepreneurial background, you could have really done anything with your next company. Why choose fintech and democratization of an alt investment like wine?
Great question. So after I sold my first company, I had a very similar experience, right? I met with my first financial advisor, and they're like, "Hey, Anthony, what do you want to do with the rest of your life?" I'm like, "Build more companies." And they're like, "Whoa, that's pretty risky. Why don't we just put all your stuff into really safe, long-term, boring 60
Oof.
40, right?" And I was like, "Whoa, I do not want that. All my other friends are starting more companies. I want to invest in them, right? I want to try out real estate and get some exposure in crypto." And I realized also um, that interest in alternatives led me down a rabbit hole one day. I was just researching what the ultra wealthy people are investing in, because I would like to become one of those people one day. And no surprise, at the top of the list, it's like wine, whiskey, art, jewelry, antique cars. I'm like, ooh, all these sound really cool, but the only one that I had previously had a passion or a connection to was fine wine, and that's really going back to my upbringing in Asia, where fine wine, especially high end Bordeaux's, high end Burgundies, they're so ingrained as part of culture, right? You want to go impress a friend, like you show your respect
Mhm.
by bringing them a gift, and oftentimes it's something you want to be able to enjoy together, like a nice bottle of wine or whiskey. And that scarcity, that value, really stuck into my head. So when I was looking at this list of potential assets to research and get into, wine just called my name, and I was like, hey, if I'm a bad wine investor, at least I got a bunch of nice stuff to drink, right? It's kind of your losses are mitigated by that, a little bit more than if you went all in on a crypto and it dropped 97%.
I love that perspective. Always seeing the positive and the up.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before that Vinovest does source, authenticate, stores, and insures each bottle of wine, which is very cool. I feel like not a lot of people actually know of this process, right? So will you talk us through that and what this looks like exactly, like for the end consumer?
Yeah, I think first of all, just letting our listeners know like how important it is, right? Because from an asset class standpoint, wine is not very risky. It has less than a third the volatility of the public equities market, so it's really hard for you to lose 50% of the value of your wine. The way that you can turn a bottle of wine into 0% is not storing it properly, right? That's the real risk, and that's why people spend a ton of money on wine cellars. Most retail investors don't have the time or effort to want to spend tens of thousands of dollars setting up their home cellar. So when we source wine, we try to source direct from the winery, and we have storage facilities set up next to all these major wine growing regions. So the amount of time between the winery and it traveling is as mitigated as much as possible. And then when we receive it, we put it into 24/7, temperature, humidity, light controlled facilities, so that wine can just sit there, age, improve. And that's really, I think, taking away one of the biggest risks in this asset class, which is the actual custody and asset protection while it's being held by an individual investor.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. I have to ask, um, is your mother-in-law a wine connoisseur before she knew you, or is this just like serendipitous that has her own little like kind of wine? I guess would you classify that as a wine cellar? There's a wine cellar in his background in case you're not
Yeah,
watching the
yeah. So we've
video.
got almost 1,000 bottles here. I'll kind of move the
What?
camera a little
Oh
bit.
my
So
gosh.
it keeps stretching. And
Well,
that's, I think, one
damn.
of the many reasons why my mother-in-law and I got along very well to start out with, because she's a huge wine lover, and
Okay.
we yeah, a lot of our conversations are centered around wine, which is awesome.
That is awesome. I actually look forward to asking you some more questions about wine in general. I should have, if it wasn't like only 1 p.m. as we're recording this Eastern time, I would probably have a glass of wine already. But, anyways, when building out your platform, what were some of the highs and lows? Because I do imagine that given the exclusivity of luxury wine, there could have been some hurdles to overcome to disrupt that space and, bring it to the everyday consumer and investor.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is that the wine industry is extremely traditional. They respect tradition, they
Mhm.
respect the way that things have been done, which is why, the way people have made wine 2000 years ago are pretty much the same way that people make it today. And given that, I knew that if we didn't approach the industry and get buy-in from the beginning, in a thoughtful way, that we would be rejected by them. And I thought,
Mhm.
we don't want to just be a disruptor, right? We want to actually improve the industry and improve the lives of the people who are making the wine, because at the end of the day, the platform that we're creating and facilitating should be able to increase transparency, take away the middlemen, and increase accessibility, which I think improves the lives of the consumers and the producers, who are, I think, the main people who add value to this industry, not all of the people in the middle. So I think that was really a key challenge, was figuring out our messaging to these winemakers. Like, we're like, hey, like, we're not just another retailer, not just another distributor looking to buy your wine. Like, we're actually connecting you with the next generation of your customers, right? The average age of a fine wine drinker is probably like 50 plus, almost 60 years old, and they're probably buying less and less wine each year. Whereas the millennials, even though today, very few of us will actually drop $1,000 on drinking a bottle of wine at dinner, will totally invest $1,000 a bottle into the same thing on Vinovest. And I think that that perspective shift really helped to click and help us align forces with a lot of these wineries that are realizing, hey, like, we got to get our brand in front of the next generation some way or the other. And if we can use this wedge, this sort of investing angle, we're still helping to bring the educational component, bring the story, bring
Mm.
everything else that makes a wine magical into the investors' kind of sphere of knowledge. And the hope is that, over the years, as we get older and we start to be able to afford to spend on luxury items like wine, what are we going to reach for first, right? Is it going to be that a random bottle, or a bottle that we'd invested in, already developed a relationship with, and helped us make money to get to where we are today, right? So that's really kind of one of the challenges and breakthroughs that we achieved in the early days of conceiving Vinovest.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that storytelling is so important, right? And I don't think it gets enough credit all the time from kind of your point of view, and demystifying notions, right? Like to think
Hmm.
that wine investing, like I could definitely see that, right? Like, oh, wine investing, especially maybe like if you backtrack 18 months ago, that wine investing is really only for older people or for someone
Hmm.
like the average wine drinker or investor at 50 or 60 years old. But I do love thinking about that long-term view of a millennial and even a Gen Zer, right, getting in front of that customer because they're gonna be older one day eventually, and
Hmm.
helping like demystify the fact that like you can invest in wine. It is affordable, it's possible, like you don't have to be your parents age to do it or what have you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean it's super helpful, and I love like the niche of it and the story. When it comes to some of the like partnerships or integrations that maybe you would look to have to help scale, what would be maybe of interest to you?
So for us, on the industry side, it's developing these relationships, right? We want to be able
Mhm.
to benefit the end winemaker, because at the end of the day, the wine market is a lot like the art market, where I think the boom of NFTs has led to a lot of artists benefiting, right? Because then they get that sort of residual income from subsequent sales, right? It's say artists today, they commission their piece for 10K, someone else sells it for a million, who then sells it for 10 million. Artist is still poor. They just made 10K. They've got nothing, and really no incentive to drive secondary market sales. And unfortunately, it's the same in the wine industry today, right? The winemaker just sells it off to one distributor, and that's about it. Even if the wine value 10x's, they don't get any money. And that's, I think, one of the things that we strive to do is when we partner with these wineries, we give them a piece of all the residual sales. And that's a new program that we're really excited to be debuting in the future.
Nice, nice. I mean, and that's yeah, one thing I always kind of preach in my content is that I believe that fintech not only can change the world, but can, I mean, when used in ethical and accessible manners, but can also, maturing technology gives us the ability for everyone to have a slice of the pie, for everyone to
Hmm.
win, for everyone to, from, you to the operators at your firm to the end consumer, and now, to the winery that is helping out your platform, and vice versa. So love to see that, and looking forward to when that kind of rolls out. That's a super interesting like partnership, and I think something that maybe even other very like niche investing platforms, maybe they, there's one that just focuses on art or whatever, that they could kind of learn from that, because
Absolutely.
we got to do more of that. We got to use all this mature technology and software that we have to actually be able to like help, keep everything interconnected, because it is. And that fintech is meant to have everyone be a part of like a greater good. So
Yeah,
uh,
I agree.
super awesome, super awesome. So Vinovest is also, the first robo advisor for fine wine. The industry trend is shifting a little more towards an interest in like hybrid financial advice. So one with has like a mobile app, but maybe a human if a user chooses. Do you have any interest in expanding the business further into actual human advice, or tapping into like a hybrid platform?
Yeah, so we haven't publicly announced it yet, but on our premium and above offerings, we do have actually dedicated portfolio managers that, on top of utilizing the robo advisor technology, are actually able to provide that dedicated resource in conducting portfolio reviews and keeping you updated in the market, and especially for newcomers to the wine investing side, actually telling you like what the f these bottles in your portfolio are. Right, they're all French and Italian names that most people can't even pronounce. And I think helping to make that parallel, I'm like, hey, this is, this wine in your portfolio, this is equivalent to like an Apple stock. This is like the blue chip creme de la creme, really stable wine that is like the backbone of your portfolio. And this other one up and coming from Tuscany, like this is like the Tesla, right? This is like super, super hot winemaker, like really, really been going up in price in recent years. And I think it really does take that in person, or over the phone or Zoom sort of educational component to help some people learn, right? Because different people like to receive and consume information in different ways, and for a lot of us, it definitely carries more weight when you're talking to a real person.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially going back to like the millennial conversation, I also have to give you kudos for saying "what the f" and playing a little bit on my podcast name. But anyways, going back to like the millennial aspect, right? And getting these products in front of them. I think that the wealthier millennial, I'll call them that instead of the elder one, they they want to graduate, right? Like robo advisory can kind of be like a graduation program almost, like, or you get into that. And then when you
Hmm.
feel like you are ready, or you have a certain amount of wealth, eventually you're going to want to talk to a human. Like, eventually you're going to want someone to really help, and like a true tried and true professional. I don't know if like robots are ever going to replace that. I don't think robots are ever going to replace like that human connection. So yeah, no, that's awesome that you guys are gonna build that out, and I think that's like the next wave of like auto investing, because I do think investors like want to be more engaged with their investing, and to do so, you have to like also connect to a human.
Totally.
I imagine that's what you're saying, and maybe even hearing from your customers.
It totally is. And I think you're totally right in that, like, the robots, they can't completely replace a lot of wealth management and investing, right? Because a lot of it is managing your emotions. If you see
Mhm.
things go down or go up, you're gonna feel one type of way or the other. And robots not gonna be like, hey, like, let's stick to the 10-year plan that you came up with. Or if you need to buy a house for some reason or have an emergency, you want to pull out, like, robots not going to tell you not to. They don't know your life situation, right? And I think we're still a far ways off from having like a fully AI version of that telling you what to do. It'd be kind of scary if that were the truth.
Right? So I should feel like somewhat relieved that my Siri or that my Alexa doesn't understand me the first time because I don't know if I
Yeah, even though
want
if
her
we're
to
mad at
always.
her, we can't let her get too smart.
Exactly. That's good. What is your favorite fine wine investment? Is that something I imagine maybe you get asked that a lot?
Yeah, I would say one of our favorite recent investments was the Dominus 2018. So Dominus is a winery in Napa Valley, but it's from a French winemaker. So they make in a very classic Bordeaux style, and our wine trading team actually secured a pretty large allocation. I want to say about 2 months ago, and less than a month ago, it was named the number one wine in the world, and that led to a lot of press, it getting sold out everywhere else, and prices definitely increased pretty quickly. So we're able to see some pretty exciting price action on that wine, and especially in an industry where the price appreciation is pretty slow and steady. It's highly just correlated with the age of the bottle and how long you hold it. It was kind of fun to kind of see some crypto-esque returns in a few days, in a otherwise sort of safe and boring return profile type of asset class.
It is well, I guess. I was gonna say it's not boring. Yeah, I mean it's also interesting to think like would does it work at all for like other liquors to be or I guess just liquor because wine's not a liquor to ever be like a part of your platform? Like is that ever something you think about like building upon? Like, okay, we got fine wine, maybe we'll do like expensive liquors or like champagnes or something like that.
Yeah, we're all in on champagnes and other sparkling wines, and we're actually in the process of structuring together a whiskey fund. So
Oh,
like fine
nice.
wines, rare Scotch, Japanese whiskey, American bourbon and whiskey, um, they have a lot of the very similar return profiles as wine, right? It's a supply and demand play. They're scarce, and they also are very highly correlated with the age of the cask. So
Mhm.
that's something that we'll be branching into, allowing folks to not only invest in bottles of whiskey, but also in the actual cask as it's maturing.
Oh, that's awesome. I do love a good Japanese whiskey, and that is something that, oh man, I wanna jump on this train. This is so fun. You speaking a little bit about crypto, you also write about NFTs, the popularity of collectibles, and
Mhm.
tokenization. So, any interest in incorporating blockchain technology into your business?
It's something we're definitely interested in. I think it would be really beneficial for quite a few reasons to be able to incorporate some of that technology into the wine industry and spirits industry in general. And I think the main reason is on that sort of digital ownership, right? In an asset class that's very much so collector centric, right? People want to show off the rare wines that they have. People want to be able to verify that, hey, this is one of only 10 bottles, right? And a lot of wineries and other luxury sort of goods companies have your sort of like QR codes that you can scan and verify, right? And but that's only one website, one winery. How can you take it into a more global sphere? That I think NFTs can play a big part of that. And
Mhm.
how can you determine real life scarcity, right? If somebody wants to drink wine off of our platform, we can just actually burn the token and show that, hey, this wine has actually left our custody. It's now off the market. So before there were only 99 bottles, now there's 98. So I think in ways like that, our team's been thinking of a few curious solutions for being able to incorporate that technology into our platform.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many use cases, and I think sharing those use cases are one of the best ways to get more folks understanding NFTs and tokenization and why we're all so excited about it. I went to my first NFT gallery.
Ooh.
I know, and I went to it was like Crypto Week in New York a few weeks ago, and which is amazing. I love that. That's a thing. And yeah, I found myself in an NFT gallery, and I was like, yeah, this is cool. I totally understand this. Like seeing it
Nice.
for the first time. I imagine that, that's probably something like do you guys ever go and visit the wine cellars or the I guess you would maybe the future whiskey barrels that
Yeah, so we've got team members all across the globe. So in Europe, we store a lot of wine there. We have a pretty large user base in Asia as well. So we've got folks, with our sellers in Hong Kong and Singapore. So it's cool to actually see it, and we also bring our clients to see it when they want to travel.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to be able to be like, hey, like all this wine that I was storing in my virtual cellar through Vinovest, I'm actually in the UK and I can see, in this huge warehouse full of millions of bottles of wine, this is my little corner at Vinovest, and these
So
are the
cute.
bottles I actually own. So
I
we've
love
done a
that.
few client visits like that, and expect to do a lot more, especially as the world opens up.
That is awesome. I imagine even, international expansion is probably something you'd love to do.
Hmm.
And being able to, right, have even like just a growing amount of um, investors like across ponds, if you will, be a part
Hmm.
of the platform. I mean, is there anything that that you can do to increase that, or like to really make a splash in a place you love, like Beijing, or um, or do you kind of just like keep on the growth trajectory and ride the wave?
Yeah, we definitely want to invest pretty heavily into the Asian market, just because it is poised to be the largest consumption market for fine wine in the world. So right now, China still lags behind the United States, but the growth rate is expected to eclipse the total sort of market consumption size in probably the next 5 to 7 years, and we want to stay
Wow.
ahead of that. So we definitely want to be able to invest heavily into international expansion. I believe fintech should be global and borderless, and wine is something that can be consumed anywhere, right, and is produced anywhere. So I think just even the fundamentals of the asset class and the nature of the business that we're building, it's definitely not an afterthought for us. It's been on our mind since day one to be able to build our platform to be globally accessible on day one. But of course, there's still a lot of work for us to be able to do to you know, make the Vinovest experience in China versus in the UK versus
Hmm.
in the United States feel native and feel smooth the same way it does now for our American users.
Exactly, exactly. And I have asked you a lot about kind of different plans to kind of address the next wave of growth for Vinovest. But kind of overall, right? What does that look like? Like when you're heading into 2022, what gets you most excited? And is there like a milestone that you hope to hit, or yeah, just like a goal you have for the coming year?
Yeah, I think for us, it's really planting those flags internationally. I want to be able
Mhm.
to establish just really incredible operating teams abroad and establish user bases. Like I would love for, right now I'd say we're about 85% user base in the United States. I'd love for that to look like, 50% United States,
Yeah.
50% everywhere else. Not to say that, our user base in the United States won't grow, but I'd love to see that distribution be a little bit more diverse by the end of the year or end of next year. And I think that would be a huge win for us and a huge milestone to hit.
Speaking of international and culture, culture is something that is super important here at What the FinTech, and something I always like to ask our guests about. So, talk to me about how you balance your company culture and values while really scaling a fast growing FinTech like Vinovest.
Yeah, I think uh, in terms of us and our company culture, it really is rooted in remote first, and amongst that, being able to be extremely inclusive. Like from day one, when it was just Brent and I, two co-founders in LA who lived, we lived like 3 miles away from each other. We decided to be a remote company,
Hmm.
mostly because we hated LA traffic, but it ended up being a good call when the pandemic hit us a few months later. And I think since then, we've just leaned in even more into building that sort of remote lifestyle, building the sort of benefits that are globally inclusive for no matter if it's our newly hired employee in Switzerland or someone here in LA. We want the employee experience to be um, consistent in ways, but also be able to highlight ways that we can still connect with each other. So a lot of
Hmm.
the internal tools and processes, and because we have such a also a diverse employee base in terms of experiences, no one knows everything about fintech and wine and everything at the same time, right? There's wine industry people, there's finance industry people, there's tech and startup people. So we really do promote a culture of cross learning and sharing because no one's an expert on everything in the company, but we do need to be an expert on all three at Vinovest to be able to succeed. So the sort of cross pollination of learning, whether it be work related topics or just passion related topics, we encourage a lot of that sharing and transparency within our organization at Vinovest.
Yeah, there is something about being, remote at the core that already makes a company, inherently inclusive, right? You're capable of being flexible to, different employees' needs and, kind of their own work culture, right? While also still kind of fueling like a camaraderie. So it's really telling, right, of like a fintech's ability to be able to manage that. So that's very, very cool. I also love, thinking about just building out teams that are diverse because
Hmm.
you need someone to check your blind spots. Like no one's
Totally.
perfect. No one knows everything, like you said. And if everyone, if you start a company with just a bunch of former, I don't know, bankers or whatever, then, no one has different experiences or like somewhat like you got to avoid that group think. And I think that's something that fintech can be better about, which is what makes kind of the startup scene so exciting because I think more startups are emerging that are truly addressing that and being intentional. You have to be very intentional about your diversity in the team that you build at the foundation because at the end of the day
Totally.
there's more than enough data out there to show that that creates long-term success and true product innovation.
Yep, absolutely. Better outcomes, better ways to make decisions as a business. And you have to do it from the beginning, right? You can't just be like, oh, I'll wait till we're at 50 people because we're too small to care about diversity. Like it has to be day one, be intentional because that's the only way you can do it and create it as a fabric of the company rather than an afterthought.
Exactly. It is not just a trending topic, it is a part of the fabric of a smart and successful fintech. So kudos to you and all of the success that Vinovest has. One of my last questions I will ask you is that you are, obviously super busy. You have done a lot, and I honestly you might even be younger than I am, but what content are you consuming? Is there any books or movies or music or anything that kind of helps you keep balanced, or wine while you watch a movie that keeps you
Yeah,
balanced?
it's a lot of wine, but I call it market research these days. But in terms of like books and content, um, one that I'm reading right now that I'm enjoying a lot is called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. So my coach recommended that to me, and I've really been enjoying reading that. I think, I am pretty young. I'm in my mid 20s, and I have a lot to learn, especially with how fast the company is growing. I owe it not only to myself but to our shareholders and to our employees for me to up level myself, every single month. Because if I was the same Anthony as I was 6 months ago, I would be working myself out of a job at Vinovest. That's how quickly things are growing. So it's a lot of self improvement, and then a lot of stalking smarter people than I am on Twitter.
Oh my gosh, that's so smart. I do the same thing. Thankful for Twitter for that and the Twitter sphere. Shout out
Yes.
to FidTwit. But yeah, no, I mean, I resonate with just kind of thinking about being younger and being in our 20s. I actually feel really grateful for it, and just like the changing terrain of everything that has happened because of the pandemic. I feel like we've been underestimated for a while, and
Hmm.
that is going away. And we're starting our things, and we're doing things out on our own. We're branching out. We're part of the Great Resignation. So, you know, kudos to us for being a part of that because
Yes.
I don't. I got tired of being called inexperienced. That's for sure, just because of
There you
my
go.
age. But anyways, final thoughts, Anthony. The question I ask all my guests, please tell us what the F we can expect from you and Vinovest next.
All right. So next year, definitely expect a lot of new product innovation. We want to be able to do things that have never been seen in the wine investment space. So we've got a few really big, exciting announcements in the first half of Q Q Q2, I think. And then the other thing is expect wine investing to be a lot bigger part of institutional conversations. Right now we've been mostly retail focused, but through the past few years, as we've built out our track record, we're moving upstream, and I think that's also really exciting to be able to bring, an institutional grade type of investment to a lot of other people who are searching for new sources of yield. Right, all the 60-40 portfolio managers, they're waking up, they're realizing they got to offer something new and not just another ETF to their clients, and we want to be right there as well.
Love it. Love that. Such a fan of you and the work that you are doing to just bring more access to more people. It's what Fintech is here to do. So thank you so much, Anthony, again, for joining us on this episode. Really appreciate it.
Awesome, Nicole. I've had a lot of fun, so thanks for having me.
Okay. Good, of course. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you loved this episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button. You can find me on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, talk to you soon.